outspoken Congressman Ron Paul, who is running for president. How does he feel about the president's dire forecasts if Congress fails to raise the debt ceiling?
Fear tactics is the tool of big government. Continuing the process is worse than facing up to the facts that we're out of money and we're flat out broke. So he should never challenge and tell us that we're not seriously worried about this. But the whole thing is, fear tactics is the tool of big government.
You're opposed to cutting a deal to raise the debt ceiling. In a press conference today, the president disagreed.
We shouldn't be in office if we don't understand what the Constitution says. It's plain and simple.
I mean, the problem is debt. How do you solve the problem of debt? By going further in debt. An individual couldn't do it.
Forecasts if Congress fails to raise the debt ceiling?
The most important thing would be to change the amount of money we spend on militarism. And that would be the change in foreign policy, which a president can do. He can bring the troops home. He's in charge of the troops. That would save a lot of money. And that's where I would start. I wouldn't start on cutting health care, especially for the poor and the elderly.
President Obama stated emphatically today that the American military mission in Libya does not fall under the jurisdiction of the 1973 War Powers Resolution.
We shouldn't be in office if we don't understand what the Constitution says. It's plain and simple.
The problem is debt. How do you solve the problem of debt? By going further in debt. An individual couldn't do it.
You think the president does not have the right to engage the U.S. in the NATO-led effort in Libya without Congress's approval.
You take an oath of office to obey the Constitution. If we don't know what it says, how can we take the oath? The Constitution is very clear. You don't go to war without a declaration.
To solve the problem of debt by just raising the debt limit and spending more money and printing more money, it's absolutely bizarre. It makes our problems worse because the driving force has always been personal liberty. Believing that if people have a right to their life and their liberty and they have a right to keep the fruits of their labor, we would be free and prosperous and the best chance ever to have peace. So that drives me. But the different issues separated out from the general philosophy of freedom is, the monetary policy, the Federal Reserve, the foreign policy, useless wars, doing things that are unconstitutional. You put this all together, and it's a lack of respect or desire or understanding about true liberty, and therefore they come together. But the monetary issue was one of the particular issues that has driven me over the many years.
Do you agree that members of Congress who are calling for U.S. troops to leave Libya are sending mixed messages to Gaddafi, and is it important that U.S. politicians are unified on the issue?
Well, no, it's not important. What is a free country supposed to do? What is a democracy supposed to do? What are debates all about? This idea that you can't dissent from a president that we sincerely believe is thwarting the Constitution, we're not supposed to say anything? I mean, that's just beyond imagination. So
first I want to ask you about a point Senator John Kerry raised. As you know, he's the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, and he raised the point that if Congress wanted a say in this, they actually had a chance. Listen to this.
You're saying the president violated the process here and didn't come to the Congress. He did come to the Congress. He sent us a letter requesting us to do the authorization, and we didn't do it. That's the simple fact here.
Today, the president said that the criticism he has not sufficiently consulted with Congress is actually just partisan politics. He says he has consulted with Congress repeatedly, had people in repeatedly, addressed this issue repeatedly. Are you using this issue simply to score political points?
He hasn't called me, and he hasn't come to the Congress, and the Congress is everybody, and if you follow the law says, the Constitution says, if you go to war, you have to have a declaration, and you can't replace that with saying, well, we had a UN resolution, we went to NATO. Many, many years ago, after World War II, when NATO was set up, Mr. Republican Robert Taft said, don't get into NATO, because before you know it, we'll use NATO for having us slip into these wars, and his predictions were exactly right. The sovereignty of this nation depends on us and not the UN, and the Constitution is the law of the land, and we don't have to be constitutional lawyers to understand that. We don't need lawyers to tell us what to do and not to do.
The law does allow him to make this commitment on his own. Listen to this for a moment, if you would.
I'm not a Supreme Court justice, so I'm not going to put my constitutional law professor hat on here. Do I think that our actions in any way violate the War Powers Resolution? The answer is no. So I don't even have to get to the constitutional question.
That's a horrible statement. No, he should get to the Constitution. He doesn't have to be a constitutional lawyer. You take an oath of office to obey the Constitution. If we don't know what it says, how can we take the oath? The Constitution is very clear. You don't go to war without a declaration. It's the law of the land. Even that he has violated because he can't go to war by talking to the United Nations and NATO and refusing to talk to the Congress. I think this is so sad, and the kind of thing that I have been fighting with both parties for decades now. I think it's taken one step worse because he's been a little bit more aggressive in declaring that he is the unitary president, that he can do what he wants. He doesn't have to tell the Congress. So I find it rather sad that he has taken that position. I don't know what he's talking about on the appropriations. He has no explicit appropriations for this war. So he doesn't have the money and he doesn't have the authority, and we're slipping into another war. Nobody can even count the wars. Nobody knows whether this is number 4 or number 5. With a country that's flat out broke, and we allow our presidents to do this, this just means that, you know, the constitutional process and the economic situation in this country is totally out of control.
I didn't think we'd be this far along in converting the country to the views I've expressed, because I am challenging. I want to change a lot. I'm challenging 100 years of history.